again, and welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection show showcases emerging indie authors who join us for a discussion of their newly published books. Join us for a conversation with our next guest author. Hi there, welcome to Author Roundup. My name is Emma, and in today's episode, I have with me author Myrl Talkington. Myrl Talkington is a gifted author whose novel Walk the Pretty Way Home is more than just a story. It's a testament to the strength of faith, the beauty of redemption, and the unshakable grace that only God can give. Myrl's writing reminds us that no matter how winding the road or how heavy the burden, there is always hope. Hi, Myrl. Thanks for being here today. How are you?
Hi, Emma. It's so good to see you.
It's so good
Thank
to
you
see
for
you
having me.
too. Yeah, thank you for being here. So your book came out recently last year, correct?
September, I think the
September.
1st of September. Yes, uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah, and so can you tell us a little bit more about your book?
I can. I was very young when my memory and it served me very well because the other members of the family would say, "How do you remember all that junk?" And I'd say, "Well, I just have a good memory." No, but
Mhm.
I was harmed and I was hurt and I was a little girl and my mother was so sick with tuberculosis and she'd
Mhm.
had 9 children and she went into one of the trailers that were parked along the little town streets and she had the test for TB. And so we didn't even know we didn't know anything about her illness. And nobody else did. Our father kept it hidden, but she knew the signs and she knew it
Mhm.
was TB. So she went into this facility and they said, "We need to pick you up in about 2 weeks and you'll be gone for 2 years."
Oh,
And
wow.
so, how many children do you have? 7. And so she knew when she left there that number one, my father would never allow her to see a doctor of any kind. And so 2 of her babies died, one in the birth canal, and because it's perfectly healthy baby, all of us were. And then the second one died 3 months later. So she lost two, and it buckled her. I mean, it was. But my father was brutal.
Mm.
He came from a life of terror and war, and he wasn't in any wars, but uh, he had gone through uh, some really hard times. They lived in Indian territory in Oklahoma, and that's when the government would come in and take all the land, even after it was planted, and these people were very poor.
Mhm.
So he was angry all the time. He was angry about everything. And his father was really just as bad as he was. And his brother, he had a brother that was just as bad as he was. So they were a team of angry. And my mother was so weak from the illness and 9 children, but she had the stamina of any human being I'd ever been around in my life. Daddy made her work the fields, and so the fresh plowed dirt, the dirt would always be in the air down her lungs. And
Mhm.
I would cry as a child. I sometimes I would pull her cotton sack on the row
Mhm.
because at that time I was only 3 years old. And when Daddy
Mhm.
told us that he was taking us to this place where no one would ever find us, he puts us in a pickup truck, broken down with what tiny bit of furniture that we had. The big brothers, all rode in the back, except Alan Earl was like a twin to me. That my mother named us like we were twins because she didn't have any other names. But
Mhm.
I was Ellen Myrl and he was Alan Earl. And it's kind of funny because
Mhm.
he used to tell everybody we were twins. And I would never dispute that because I didn't, he was one of the mentally damaged children at birth. Anyway, she almost died having Alan Earl.
Mhm.
And so, anyway, that was her. eighth, and was her seventh child, and then I was the eighth, and then she had a baby before we left the house we lived in Sapulpa, Oklahoma. And so now we're on the way to this hideout in the woods, and it had been probably a bootlegger's cabin. And so we had no electricity, no running water. We had a well, but it was 110 feet deep.
Oh
Well,
my.
small children cannot draw water, and neither can a lady with full-blown tuberculosis that weighed 90 pounds, and she was 5'9". She was dying. And so that was the life. And we left there when I was 10 years old. So you can imagine. They did get a book, I think the last 8 months we lived there, which was just so joyful. So that was just a tip into my life, but going back to the farmland and the hideout where we stayed. Um, it was bleak. We had icicles that were 12 inches long in the wintertime inside the bedroom. We only had one
Mhm.
bedroom for 9 people. I've been all over the world, and so I've seen poverty at different levels, and ours was as bad as any I've ever seen in my
Mhm.
life. I was just telling this guy that helps me with my computer. He said, Myrl, I ordered your book and I'm just enthralled. I can't put it down. I said, it's funny. That's what everybody says. And I've had ladies at the church that said, I haven't missed a night of sleep in 50 years. And I would not put this book down. And so,
Oh.
and, and I thought, well, they're going to think it jumps around a lot. It's written, almost sounds like it's written by a schizophrenic. But if you're in that family, you get some of those genes too. My husband, I married at 33 years old, and my husband was a vascular surgeon. So the first time he met my mom, uh, he could tell that she was very, 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 very ill.
Mhm.
So, as all doctors do, they give the little mini exam when they're standing before a patient. And so he said, you've got a good heart, but you've got a weak heartbeat. And that was part of her demise, of course, because by then she was like 70.
Mhm.
And he said, so one day he said to me, Merle, we're going to Muskogee this Friday. I've booked out of surgeries, and so we're going to Muskogee. I want to meet your mom. I want to see her again. I want to meet her now after, I met her before we married, but I want to go back. And we may be bringing her back home with us. So Mama was put in care, and they took all of her, they took her X-rays and showed that she had no lungs.
Mhm.
One was all gone, and the other one was three-fourths gone. I said to Mac when we were leaving Muskogee, why are we doing this? He said, and he whispered it, and he was very angry. He said, I cannot find your mother's heart, okay? I'm chief of vascular surgery at the biggest hospital in Dallas, Texas, and I cannot find your mother's heart. And so they got her in the car. We get to Dallas and they did the x-rays. And then the doctors came in at 6:30 the next morning to her room, and I was there. If she was as bad as Mac was seeing, that he knew that medicine could never touch her. There's nothing they could do. So anyway, you know, they sent her home, of course, with many tears. All the doctors were crying. They said, we have never seen a human being walking like this, never in our lives.
Mhm.
I said, well, I'll tell you a secret. She asked God to let her live till her last child graduated from high school. And Beverly's been out of school 3 or 4 years. And, we're all ready to let go of her.
Mhm.
because it's hard when you know that she can't breathe and she looks like she's breathing, but she's not breathing.
Mhm.
So, anyway, my life as a child was devoted to my mother. And my mother
Mhm.
never felt that. And anyway, you know, back to back to the woods and the hideout. Uh, you know, I I had to skip forward so I could get in there what was wrong with my mom, and she actually had no lungs when she died.
Mhm.
And those doctors were sobbing that she had given birth to 9 children with tuberculosis. Because then they were not doing the testing. And then when they started doing the testing in the late 40s and 50s, she managed to get into one. I was born in 46, and my little sister was born in 49. And so by then, she had never given up. She was determined. She was a pioneer woman herself growing up, and she was determined. So when Daddy hit us in the woods, he had already taken her to that spot when he asked her to marry him, because it was very similar to the spot where they were hidden when he was a child.
Mhm.
And I think he knew then that when and if she did disobey him and go in and have her lungs tested, that he would need a secret place again. And so that's the book. That is the
Yeah.
book. And
Yeah. And so the title of your book is Walk the Pretty Way Home. And it's very, beautiful and powerful. What does the pretty road mean to you, especially in context of such a difficult childhood?
okay. Well, the Pretty Road, I mean, that was joyful children, Alan Earl and Ellen Merle, dancing
Mhm.
in the gravel and the dirt, and walking through a little stream, and getting our feet a little bit of that rusty dirt off,
Mhm.
there were so many little things in the stream to stop us, and so we couldn't stop or we'd get in big trouble. And I mentioned earlier that the two brothers that got beatings all the time from my dad was Alan Earl and John Dean, because they were bedwetters. And that was the thing I had to watch. And Daddy made me watch so I would just not disobey him. So my sobs were just as loud as Alan's.
Mm.
John Dean never cried because he was grown by then, and I mean, a man by then, and so he decided it was not cool to cry, so he didn't. But Alan and I cried enough for everybody. And so then the roads that we traveled, we had let Becky get a little bit ahead of us, but she was terrified of snakes, and so she had to stay right with us. That stick was in her hand, and I mean, and so Alan would say he's going to throw a dead snake on. He said, "I'll kill the snake, and then I'm going to throw it on you." Well, then that'd make her just burst into tears and scream. And so we had to practically carry her on to school because she's having herself a fit. What Alan had just said. I mean, but anyway, she was a mess. She was a mess. It's like when she got the Christmas candy. We always got a sack from the school, with oranges and apples and orange slices and hard candy
Mhm.
and nuts. And so Becky would hide hers, and she for some mysterious reason she would always have hers after ours was already gone, but she was eating out of ours. But she never would share hers. And so the walks were sometimes Becky would have that Christmas candy in a pocket, so she'd pull it out and we could smell peppermint, and we could smell this and that and the other. And she'd say, "I don't have anything in my mouth." And of course, it'd be dripping down the side of her mouth. And anyway, that was the Pretty Road was the birds chirping in those trees, because the road was covered with these trees that overhung the dirt road. And so the birds were always fighting and cackling, and so it was just a joy. And then there would be livestock in the fields that we could see, or, one
Mhm.
would be at the fence, like wanting us to come over and give her an ear of corn, which I did that one time. And the cow behind me, I gave the cow and across the fence an ear of corn. And then this cow behind came up and picked me up by the seat of my pants and put me over the fence. And I had so much trouble getting back because I couldn't. But that was the bull really because he had horns and put me over the fence. Anyway, I just the roads were hot, that hot 100-degree because we went to summer school. So the,
Mhm.
the temperature would be 100 degrees. So it was hot sand on your bare feet. And my dad was a cobbler and sold secondhand shoes, but he would never let us have shoes in the summertime. So our feet were scalded at first, and then the calluses came, and then, we were okay.
Mhm. Well, there's definitely, despite the darkness in your childhood, there's moments of humor in your memoir. Why was it important to include those lighter moments in your
Well,
book?
because that's who I was. I would
Mhm.
be always trying to make the family laugh. And
Yeah.
so I would do things that would just say, look at her, look what she's doing. She thinks she can actually do that. And I'm like, I can. And so, and I would climb up a tree maybe where a water moccasin was in the tree. And they would be like, and I'm like, watch me. I never put that in the book either. I didn't want kids to think that would be a joyful thing for them to do. But I was a risk taker. And when I went home with two different families, and they said, "Why did you get off the bus here?" I said, "I just want to see how other people live." And they lived just like we did. They
Mhm.
had beans and cornbread and well water, but they had power. They had
Mhm.
electricity.
Mhm.
So that's what I was just devastated that Daddy would not put in electricity. And we didn't have an outdoor toilet or an indoor toilet.
Mhm.
So that was another thing that was bleak. But we had Alan and I had kittens that we loved. And so if one got stepped on by a cow, we'd make it a wonderful funeral and bury it in mother's matchbox or whatever.
Mhm.
And but I was full of laughter. I was not a depressed child. I was filthy dirty. I was confident. The teachers didn't care. They didn't care. They knew that we didn't have any place to bathe. They never said anything negative to either of us kids. They were so happy to have me because when I started, I was making straight A's from the very beginning, or in grade, and we didn't have a kindergarten or anything like that. We just started in the first grade.
Mhm.
So anyway, I was above average in my studies, very much. Well, straight A's, and as long as we were in that town.
What do you hope readers who grew up in maybe like a similar circumstances will feel when they read your memoir?
I think they can't help, they can't miss the joy
Hmm.
that I was just oozing in joy because I saw this when I looked at those magazines. I knew that's what I was going to do when I grew up.
Hmm.
I knew I was going to be a decorator. I didn't know there was a such thing as an interior designer. Well, after 5 years, guess what? My clients were so hysterically happy with me. They got together with the showrooms and they said, Myrl Talkington needs to be grandfathered into ASID. Within a week, I had my ASID approval with a letter that says, congratulations, we'd love to see your work. And so they all started publishing my work.
Hmm.
And I had stacks of magazines. And my cousin never helped me get in. She was going to put me in Southern accents, and then she was going to put me in um, veranda. And she never put me in one of them. And my husband said, Merle, when she goes on your jobs in New Orleans, because I did a lot of like down in the French quarters, and
Mm-hmm.
I turned them into magic. But see, that was that child at Lee Choir. I knew seeing these pictures, I said, well, I don't need to hire a decorator. I'll just do what's on this picture, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so that's what I started telling my clients. I said, get the magazines and that'll tell you what you like, and then I can do what you like. I don't have to copy the magazine, but I can, you're not going to be disappointed. And then I would work for someone. The last real client I had, the house was 15,000 square feet, and he had paid $15 million for it.
My gosh.
So he said, "You're going to have a very good budget. I've seen your work." I took him to the showrooms. He said, "Well, my other decorator did not show me the showrooms. These are the real thing, aren't they?" I said, "They sure are." And I said, "Your house will be a showplace."
Mm-hmm.
And it was beyond that. And so, anyway, that was just one of the joys, is knowing as that little kid, the pictures gave me insight to everything
Mm-hmm.
in those magazines. And so it was a window of liberty, I
Mm-hmm.
guess I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. And how did you know when you kind of like made it, like how did you build this life for yourself and how did you have that motivation and resilience to not, to have a better life for yourself that you deserved?
Well, I bought my first house at 23 years old.
Oh, wow.
And you say, well, how'd you do that? Well, I lived in trailer houses and I commuted to Oklahoma State University, where my husband was in school.
Mm-hmm.
And the first year I commuted, I didn't tell anybody that I was commuting
Mm.
because I knew I had to never be late. Never, never, never. But it allowed me to pay for the trailer house, and it allowed me to help him in college. And we had a great time. We were there for 3 years, and then he joined the Marines and went to Vietnam, and all his friends were killed. So that was my first husband,
Mm-hmm.
and and he was the love of my life. And when he came back, it was I mean, I think I did the dirtiest thing that anybody ever did to a vet. I said, we're not going to make it because if you're not going to work, I was working, you know, the full time, and I didn't live in a foxhole for 2 years. He needed love and he needed appreciation and he needed his mother, and his mother worshiped the ground that he walked on. And I just wanted him to go to work. I'd paid for his education
Yeah.
and I didn't get to have one myself. And so but anyway, he married and had two kids immediately and happily ever after. And then he died early because he was drinking the water where Camp Pendleton was. And I can't remember if it was in Alabama or where it was, but I think it was Alabama. But that's where he got the cancer and
Mm-hmm.
died. Very, very sad.
Yeah.
And he was the love of my life. It was so interesting. He was a fabulous pianist and he had learned when he was a child. So, he'd had many, many lessons. And that was my joy, was getting to hear him play, because he could have been Fats Domino. He could have been anybody. And he gave up the piano. He didn't want to ever play the piano again.
Mm-hmm.
He died when the bullets and the deaths, 60,000 of those boys were killed. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where Johnny was, at the main door, the window of the war. It's where he was for 2 years. They were supposed to bring him back after a year, but Johnson took office and he said, no, everybody's staying where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what destroyed my first husband.
So you mentioned that you started your book or were inspired to start your book in the 90s, right?
Yes, I did. I
Yeah.
started when my brother was killed.
Yeah. And so how long did it take you to write your book?
Well, I had to stop. I had written it, but I had to stop writing it when Matt came back, and the book was, um, it was actually finished when I did the divorce. That was where the book ended, and that was 2007. So
Hmm.
that's when I finished the book.
Okay. And so what was the most difficult part of your writing process? Did you have a
The most
difficult part?
difficult is I couldn't say anything about the abusers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left them all out.
Mm-hmm.
I just said that I'd been abused. I felt like that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was crippled from it. I
Mm-hmm.
was uh, a lagging behind teenager because the confidence was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, when I got into high school, there was notice, and I went to this brand new high school, and it was huge. We had like 350 in our class. So it was huge. It was not like the seven at Lee Choir that we had in the
Mm-hmm.
first grade and the second grade. The grades were all put together. So
Mm-hmm.
you'd have maybe 40 kids in one room, but they would be all different ages. And so anyway, the thing about that was that I I was so ashamed. The shame is what kills you. The shame is what rips you apart and tears you down, and you know that everybody knows. And so I I was like you know, I was like somebody with a ghost living inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could never tell anybody. I couldn't tell mother. They said, if you tell mother, it'll kill her. She'll die on the spot. Well, of course, I believed that because I'd been taking care of mother, trying to keep
Mm-hmm.
her alive for all of the family. And so that was the part that hurt the worst
Mm-hmm.
because I was left broken,
Mm-hmm.
broken to the point that here I am, 11, and I know everything about sex. I really had to protect part of myself that was revealed, but it wasn't in a devastating way that somebody would have to not finish the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had lots I wanted to put in there, and that was that what happened to my mother was the thing that I ended up hating my father. And so
Mm-hmm.
I did not respect the Ten Commandments. I, I, he died the most peaceful, wonderful death of anyone in the family. And I was on my way to Rio de Janeiro working a charter, and they pulled me off in Chicago and sent me back to Dallas when my father died. And I knew when the pilots called me to the cockpit, I walked in and I saw their faces, and I said, my father's died, hasn't he? He was 82. And they said, yes. And so I said, okay. They said, we've got you booked on leaving out of here immediately back to Dallas in Chicago. So that was hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I had saved $6,000, which was really a lot of money for someone like me coming from that background, because I had sent money home
Mm-hmm.
too. And I never spent money on clothes like the other girls because I had my uniform to wear to work. And jeans and cutoffs and stuff like that. I didn't care anything about pretty dresses or anything like that. So I just had that money so I could pay for the funeral and give them a credit card, put it all on the credit card, and then pay for it when I flew back to Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it took up almost the whole 6,000. by the time, you got to buy them clothes and everything else. But anyway, I think that my um I had to write the book to forgive him, my father.
Yeah.
And then it was easier because talking to John Dean and my thoughts in writing the book, talking to God about I could have been John Dean or Becky or Alan. It's
Hmm.
three. And my mother had mental illness. And nobody wanted to talk about that. And I certainly didn't because I loved her so much. And we looked exactly alike.
Hmm.
And then Becky was born with the crossed eyes, severely crossed. And so I got the best of everything. Mother's looks. I tried to leave daddy's temper, but I ended up getting some of that because Mac had a bad temper, my second husband.
Hmm.
And so I worked on it with the book and with my thoughts because it was starting to haunt me that,
Yeah.
how much I hated dad. So
Hmm.
I was able to get past that too.
Hmm. What do you hope readers, when they close your book, what do you hope stays with them
I hope the
after they read
hope
it?
stays more than anything. I hope that tiny ounce of hope that's planted all through the book.
Hmm.
I would not give up. I was like that little kid. I think I can. I think I can. And
Hmm.
they taught us that in the first grade. And that was so good for me to have that in my heart.
Hmm.
And then also, uh, God was very real in my heart as a child.
Hmm.
And so my mother's prayers, I knew that's what made the tornadoes go away from us because it wouldn't take, I mean, a wolf's wind could blow away our house.
Hmm.
It was so filthy and pitiful. And uh, it had never been cleaned up. And it wasn't when we left either. And that's all I wanted to do was clean that house.
Hmm.
And mother would say, "You can't clean this house." And I'd say, "I can." But she's always made me leave it alone. I don't know. I think she was so worried about her giving us the tuberculosis that the
Hmm.
filth was to be left alone wherever we were. And
Hmm.
so I minded her. And, it was like there was something I might uncover in that place. I mean, like a dead body. I'm like, and when she always told scary stories at night. And of course, we wanted her to tell bloody buttons. I mean, that was our favorite story. And she had such wonderful, her conversations were so great because she could embellish and she could just go on and on making up stuff as she went.
Hmm.
And so the five of us that were small children were all up in one spot and I had to sit her in a chair because that's the way she said she could breathe better.
Hmm.
Then I was starting to listen more to her lungs than I was to her voice
Hmm.
because that's what told me she was dying.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a writer working on his or her first book?
Make notes.
Make
Make
notes.
notes. I remember when I first started flying, I kept a little journal, which I'm not good at, and I kept a little journal. And so I just started making notes. And that's
Hmm.
one of the ways I know that I remembered everything,
Hmm.
because I was making notes in high school. I was very bitter. I was very joyful, you
Hmm.
know. I mean, I didn't know that I would be popular, and I was one of the top 10 most popular girls in the school. And I thought, how in the world did that happen? How did that happen? Oh my gosh, how did that happen? But, it did. And so the football team, and our house was across the field, across the street from the football team. And my father got got yellow paint given to him by the railroad company, the bright yellow paint the railroad uses. So my
Mhm.
father painted that house railroad yellow. Well, I was just shocked. I just thought, why do you have to screw up every time we moved? I couldn't say a word to him. I just would always keep my head down. I couldn't say, and it was so they called me Railroad Yellow for a while, and then I turned it into fun and said, okay, well, you guys, I have names for all of you, every one of you. So you better sit down because none of you are going to like your names either. But anyway, I just and I've always been able to turn a sad face into a giggle. And
Mhm.
so that was kind of my mission to,
Yeah,
you know,
great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our audience? It's been a pleasure having you.
well, I mean, I've really enjoyed this. And if you had any idea the bullets I've been sweating over this, but
Good.
you've been fabulous, Emma.
Oh, so have you. Thank you so much.
I
I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
I thank you so much. I'm glad you were
Yeah.
the one doing the interview.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just want to say that your book is and your story is so inspiring and command you on, everything that you've been through and your persistence and your faith and thank you so much.
Oh, honey, thank you. And thank
Yeah.
everybody around you. And please tell them that you were in my living room.
Oh my God, your beautiful living room. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh, it's spectacular. It's been published. I'll send you a little picture, or maybe even one of
Okay.
the old magazines, because
Oh,
they
that would
just
be great. I would
yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
I'll call D Magazine and get a couple of theirs because theirs are new. And I have Southern Accents did make me like 1,000 brochures of the jobs
Oh,
I did
cool.
in New Orleans. So I'll send you one of the brochures too.
Oh, that would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, you've been a joy. You have
Oh,
been a
thank
joy.
you.
And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you so much. And thank you for um, this whole interview. I'm
Yeah,
so calm right now. I'm going to go back to bed
that's
with my
good.
puppies.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I just got the interview done. Now you can relax.
No, I know, I
All
know.
right. Well,
This is
thank you so
so
much.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And for you listening, you can find Myrl Talkington's book at westbowpress.com. You can purchase through the online bookstore, or you can head to Amazon or Barnes& and Noble and purchase it there. And please pick it up and leave her a review. And I thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.